listener production.
Yeah, g'day, Mike the Third here, TOFOP producer. Hey, the guys are having a break today, so we thought we would share an episode from a mate's podcast. This is Wil chatting with Urzila Carlson on their podcast.
That's enough already. It's producer Nat here. I'm going to be guiding you through literally one of the funniest episodes with comedy legend, the one and only Wil Anderson. It is so funny. Wil chats about his straight-up coffee addiction to the point where it's actually annoying his sister's dog. You'll see why. And one of the most uncomfortable things that has ever happened during one of his sets. And I am still laughing from this. So let's kick it off. This is part one with Wil Anderson.
That's quite enough. Just shut your mouth. I don't give a stuff. It shush, please. Yes, I can hear, but I don't care. That's enough already. Shut up.
Oh, shush.
How do you feel about the idea that you're now at that age group that you can be an inspiration to people, though?
I don't give a fuck about that. You know what scares the shit out of me? Someone said to me yesterday, and I just always think like they're this kid, right?
Yeah.
He's 35 years old. 35 years old. And if I had lived in a real bogan area, I could have been his mum.
Oh, I look at footballers and cricketers, and they all look like men. Like there are men in the Australian cricket team that I would call sir if I met them in real life who are young enough to be my children.
I know. My mum always used to say, she goes, if you're watching like a beauty pageant, like Miss South Africa, we used to watch Miss South Africa on the, I remember lying on my stomach on the ground, holding my chin, kicking my feet, just looking at the hot ladies, but then it was just ladies. And like just go, oh, all these aunties are so pretty. And then my mum and my actual aunties would go, you're getting old when the Miss South African pageant looks like just a whole bunch of 4-year-olds walking around. And I never understood that. Now I do. Now I look at them and go, those children need to go cover up and they will freeze to death.
Oh, it's amazing that we thought we were adults when we were 18 and 19 and 20 because when I say 18, 19 and 20-year-olds, I'm like, you haven't even grown into your teeth yet.
Exactly.
Like,
your frontal lobe is still settling. You don't know shit.
How have they let you out into the world at this stage of your life? This is a terrible disaster.
Okay, my manager is 2 years younger than me, or a year younger. Anyway, too old to be learning to drive. And I said to her, you have to have that dumb as absolute fuck within you to be able to drive. You cannot start in your 40 plus. It's too late. It's too late.
Oh, no. Yeah, that's right. It's a terrible idea. You know all the consequences at that point. You can't be learning how to drive.
Right. That's right. You got to do it in your early 20s.
One of my favorites is I'll sometimes have some young fella, like early 20s, late teens, roll up to me and I'm like, oh, here we go. What's this about? Because clearly this person is not in my demographic. He hasn't seen anything that I do. So it's not going to be directly from him to me, this message. And it is always, 95% of the time, my mum loves you.
Yes.
And on that timeline now, if that kid is in their late teens or early 20s, I'm like, your mum doesn't just love me. Your mum at some stage had a crush on me.
I dated your mum in high school.
I could be your dad. Are you checking?
Yeah, that's how fucking old we're getting. I'm sure you have a hidden, what is your hidden talent? My thing is I make a perfect cup of coffee every time. I make the best coffee. Whatever you're into, I can make it. And I'm very good at it. And I can work 99% of coffee machines out there. Any type of coffee thing you've got, you got the slow drip, you've got the Italian, you've got the air. I can do it. I can do all of it.
I mean, that's pretty amazing. So on that, so I'm currently house sitting for my we're talking during the Melbourne International Comedy Festival.
Yeah.
I normally stay in the city during the comedy festival. This year, I'm staying in the suburbs, 40 minutes drive from the centre of the Sydney. I am house sitting and dog sitting for my sister and her family who are away on a school holiday. They've got the most beautiful coffee machine and they get fresh beans delivered every couple of weeks. And I have been jittering my way around this house for 2 weeks because I have a coffee about every half an hour because it's so nice.
That
And
sounds like my life.
every time I make myself one, I'm like, I'll take the dog for another walk. I'm full of energy.
That dog's hiding. It's like, fuck, he's coming. Every time he hears it, He's like, oh shit, get away from me.
It's one of those things, honestly, where I'm like, because coffee's so expensive at the moment. Like, I mean, coffee at Perth prices all over Australia now these days,
Yeah.
like $7 for a latte. And so every time I make myself a latte, in my head, I'm like, $7 saved.
Yeah.
So like in a day, I feel like the more coffee I have at home, it's almost like the more money I've made in that day, like I'm crypto mining.
I'm because you're talking, your lips are moving, and all I'm thinking is, wait, what does your sister do? She can afford a holiday and a coffee machine?
Well, you talk about what does my sister do. So here's what I'm going to say to you. You know, one of those moments where you have it rubbed in your face of how badly you manage your own money, because there is no way, and I mean being I'm guessing, but I think it's probably a pretty accurate guess, that for every year of the last 20 years, I have earned more money than my sister and her husband combined, like in that time. And yet their house is beautiful. They have a very nice coffee machine. They've managed to raise 4 children and send them to school. Ooh. They all they went to a basketball tournament in Adelaide. I'm like, how do you manage your money? Because I always feel like I've got no money.
So this is like, I talk to my mate about this all the time. Like when we're on the road and go, oh, it's just Uber Eats every night and, heaps of weed and then you get the munchies, so it's more Uber Eats late at night. So all of that shit adds up. And then you go, and of course, I'm not an animal, so you want a bottle of red wine. And now before you look at it, you go, and that's just one night out of 45 on the road in one stint. And then you go, your sister would have one of those nights as a blowout per year.
I don't know if you're like this, but when I'm doing a tour, suddenly any rule that I might have for how I conduct myself or live my life goes out the window in service to the show. Oh, yeah. So I'm like, I do that thing of just going, you know what? I think the show's telling me that I need to have like a really expensive hot chocolate now because I need 1,200 calories to live it in a warm beverage just before the show. And I think the show is telling me that I should have toast for breakfast today. Like it all becomes that the show is sending these secret messages to me like pregnancy cravings and like all my usual rules for living my life can go out the window.
Yeah, no, and I want to do things that I wouldn't normally, like this now while I'm here for Melbourne Comedy Festival. I've gone to the sauna 4 times, just sitting in this hot box, which I would never do. But then I'm like, I'm going to write a joke about this, I'm sure of it. So this is going to be tax deductible. Everything I do, I'm like, no, I'm sure. Or I better get a massage book.
Yeah.
I don't like people touching me. But now all of a sudden I'm like, no, I think a nice hot stone massage is just the ticket. I'm experiencing this tour.
I mean, I do wonder about those people who say do a Vegas run. So like the issue with like, you tour all over the world and you do a whole bunch of festivals over the world. So occasionally you get to be in somewhere for a month like you are in Melbourne and you're doing a show every night. So you get a small insight into what it would be like to be one of those Vegas acts who say you do 300 shows a year, but they're all at the same theatre, you live in the same town, you go home, you live your life, and like your life is just, you just go and do your show at night and then otherwise you live your life. Now, which of those would you prefer? So would you prefer the one where you tour all over the world, you do your festivals, you do your one-nighters, or would you love that idea of just going, so Celine
was sort of in my growing up, that was her. She did that massive Vegas run and she's nuts. Like you look at her now and I go, it's that Vegas run that fucked her up. Now I see Adele is doing Vegas and you can see she ticks them off. She goes, another one done on her socials. She has to post every night. Another one done. It's like when prisoners carve the number on the back of the door, you can see that bitch's soul left her body. There's nothing behind the eyes. She's just going through the motions every night. You know what's the beauty of our job is we get to travel. We get to do all these nuts things and just go, oh, I'm doing it for the show. I'm doing this shit for the show. Like I ate fucking vegan for a week. Like, we're doing all this crazy stuff. But the minute you stop, it's like you manage to make the coolest job in the world a boring office job.
Yeah, I think that you're right. There is something about the change of environment and change of circumstance. Like I think there's part of like what being a comedian is interesting, particularly even just doing like a long run at the festival, is that idea that you can essentially be doing the same show every night and yet the experience can be completely different from night to night. And sometimes I was talking to Tommy Little about this the other night because I had one of those, like a night that surprises you. This last Saturday before we're talking, it was like a big sold out Saturday night show. This will be just like an easy night at work tonight. And they had been passionate enough about the show to book the tickets, and they'd certainly been passionate enough about the show to get to the venue, drive, park, maybe even book some dinner reservations that night. They weren't quite passionate enough to clap all the way to the microphone.
Oh, no.
You've had one of those ones where you just know, where you're just like, all right, okay, this is going to be work tonight. I literally couldn't all the way, where you have to kind of wave your hand a little to get them to clap, just so you can make it all the way to the microphone.
Ear a little bit. Can't quite hear you because you fucking stopped. That's why. That's normally when I blame whoever's doing the scanning as they come in, because obviously, like you say, they had the enthusiasm, they had the passion, they had everything. They queued up outside like farm animals in the rain and then came in. Something happened from cracking through the doors to getting on their seats. Something pissed them off. It's the ticket scanning people. And they're already, sort of going, fucking, let's just get this shit started. Dance, monkey boy, dance. And you're like, why do I feel so much pressure right off the bat? It's the scanners, I tell you what.
I tell you this? I went and saw Cameron James's show that he did last year that got nominated for one of the best shows at the festival called Electric Dreams. And it's about his dreams of being a rock musician as a teenager. And it's such a brilliant show. But it's set around the year 2000. So at the start of the show, they have on a screen at the start like various images from around that time and like bands of the time, movies of the time, like TV shows of the time. And there's this random penis. Like I don't even know if it's just that's a joke or if that is a thing from the time, but it's this like random just picture of this big penis. So anyway,
that was my photo I sent in.
So he's doing a one. You send a lot of dick pics to people, which is interesting. It's not your dick. That throws people off.
Well,
that's the clever thing about it.
If they ever come to compare dicks, they go, see, it's not mine.
It's not mine. Happy to show you. It's a foolproof plan.
Mine fell in.
They just go out to your garage, they find it hidden in your golf bag. You've just like shoved it in there.
Just a ball sticking out the top. With my Bart and Homer Simpson covers up.
Well, she's got it in with the woods. That's appropriate, I suppose. That's good news. So I'm watching his show. It's a brilliant show. But this is one of those moments that was beyond his control that could have ruined the entire gig. Luckily, everybody in the room understood that it had been a mistake, right? Like it clearly wasn't one of those things that was done on purpose. But at the start of Melbourne Comedy Festival shows, but often shows around Australia at festivals, there will be an acknowledgement of country or a welcome to country, which is a message from like the Indigenous people of Australia or on behalf of the acknowledgement that, Australia, is stolen land. And so they play one at the Melbourne Comedy Festival. It comes up at the start, and literally at the bit that they get to this always will be Aboriginal land, like this penis just comes up on the screen. And I'm sorry to laugh at this because I'm only laughing because it was so inappropriate. Like if it had been done on purpose, like the gig would have ended there. Like literally if anyone had thought like he'd timed this, like it would just like people just would have started burning shit, like literally burning down the venue at the start of the gig. I was like, oh, you poor thing. But anyway, I think luckily he did not know that had happened until after the gig, because I think if he knew that had happened at the start, you're like, oh my God, how do you keep that out of your mind for the rest of the night?
You can't. It's impossible. What is the craziest shit that has ever happened in your room, like while you're doing a show? Because how many solo shows have you got? You've got like fucking 20 or 30.
27. So this is 27th, yeah. So, over the years, Like so many things is honestly the truth, as you would know. Like I mean, I've had people have heart attacks. I've never had anyone die at a show, which like
knock on wood.
I hope that. I mean, obviously my audience is getting older, so it becomes more and more
By the time
likely
you get
to see
to 30,
this
they
go
just
on.
bonk.
But I have this. Like just from this year. So on my first night here in Melbourne this year, there was a heckler up the back. It turns out he was just like drunk and he misinterpreted like a joke in the show. So I have this bit about the diggers, which is what we call the return service people, in Australia. And it's definitely on their side. It is a very pro-digger routine. Felt to me like it's so clear that I'm on the right side of this that no one would ever complain. And then this guy, I think he was just too drunk to understand the point of the bit. He gets angry. This guy has misheard something that I've said, absolutely overreacted in the wrong situation. And then I heard later from somebody that one of my other audience members, and I do not endorse this anyway, but this is an online style escalation, shouted at him in the street outside my venue that they hope he had a car accident on the way home and died. I was like, it's okay.
It's just a heckle. He can live.
It's okay.
It's like when you used to die in a fire, cunt, and you're like, oh, that's a lot.
Oh my God, this is too much. It's okay. It's just meant to be a fun night out.
This is what happens when I'm riding into my venue on the bike and I'm in the cycle lane and I'm riding with my tour manager, and if anyone's in the cycle lane, like sometimes the taxi, their ass sort of hangs out into the cycle lane. That's not something, I mean, I do enjoy road rage, but that isn't very triggering to me. With Tom, that is something that just absolutely pushes him over the edge. He's like, oh, that's it. He goes, I'm going to, and he'll yell. He goes, I'm going to hammer his boot. I'm like, dude, just let it go. It's like, but then he'll yell stuff like that. Fucking die in a fire, cunt. I'm like, it doesn't match. It doesn't match.
So you ask about weird things that happen at gigs. So I was doing a corporate show and it was a huge fundraising benefit for a really good cause. So it was one of those nights where it wasn't just a comedy night. It was like they had a range of speakers. So some of them were inspirational speakers. Some of them were motivational speakers. There was like a finance guy. There was a sports guy. And then like I was doing some comedy as well. The guy before me, who came on before me, he was a guy in a wheelchair who competed for Australia at the Olympics, but he'd also climbed Mount Everest. And so he was telling this incredible story of like being this dude who's in a wheelchair, but was also able to climb Mount Everest. So he was going to be tough to follow at the best of times, to come on and go, hey, so I grew up on a dairy farm. How are you guys going?
I'm a richest to richest story. How's it going in here?
So here's what happens. This guy makes this incredible speech. Like, honestly, it's brilliant. Like, it's obviously his thing that he takes to all these corporates. So it's, the whole thing's been done a million times. It has this perfect crescendo. Like, the entire audience give him a standing ovation, which I honestly thought was bad taste to a guy in a wheelchair. I felt like give him the respect to stay in your seats, Like... Don't rub it in. This guy is
the rules. Scoot your chair forward.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. So because this stage has been brought into this room, it's not like a venue that is geared to accessibility. Instead of having like a ramp for this dude to like come up, they have one of those lifts, like those mechanical lifts, so that he just rolls into it and then it just lowers him down the back. But it's got like a safety light and a little small beep that I guess it has to have for whatever reasons, right? And so the MC of the night thinks that this guy's gone so well that he might as well keep the night rolling and get me out there to do my stand-up comedy. Now, at the best of times, I would have liked a couple of minutes of resetting the room for me to come out and do my thing after that. But in this particular instance, it would have been even more helpful to me, because I had to do the first 5 minutes of my set while this hero who just had everyone enthralled with his hero story of getting up Mount Everest is being lowered slowly down behind me with this beep and this flashing light while I'm trying to be so politics, what's going on with John Howard and stuff?
When you're wanking into a sock. Beep, beep.
And I'm like, he fucking made it up Everest by himself. He could probably get down off the stage without this. He doesn't need this. He's a hero. And I didn't. I wish I'd had the courage.
I 100% would just get him a rope, let him know.
He'll be fine. It's like 1.5 meters.
That's disrespectful to this guy. This is just a stage.
Yeah, patronising him.
Like, leave him be.
Yeah.
He can sort it out. I honestly thought that story was going to go because it was just a drop-in stage and there was no safety or anything. He rolled off stage and he fell off. That's where I thought that was going to go. So
that would have been a blessing compared to what actually happened.
Oh my God. Yeah. Tell me, because I have two things that conversation starters that producer Natalie milked you for.
Yeah, I did notice.
I know. I usually hate it when people go.
It's like, glad that you and I will
I'm
really
like,
need
don't
some
worry.
conversation starters. I think we started this conversation half an hour ago.
People say especially radio stations, but I get it. Your personality doesn't have to reflect who you are on stage. But when you're promoting your show, people want to, you can't be all, so I've got a show that's coming up in, Melbourne Town Hall. It's gonna, like you listen to them on radio and you go, fuck, I don't want to go see this guy. And then
it's my advice to new people all the time, which is like the radio stations aren't interested in you. Like they're interested in not having to do something for 3.5 minutes. And if you can come in and be funny and interesting and entertaining for 3.5 minutes, they'll get you back on every year. Like that's what they want.
Year. And now my spots are like 10 minutes. I'm there. I'm doing the morning show. I'm doing
that's right.
the first 2 blocks.
Can we get Urzila to guest host today? Yeah. She's doing 10 to 12.
100%. They go, do you mind staying for 3 breaks? I'm like, no, not at all.
Yeah.
And I keep your energy up, keep it short, sharp, and boom, boom, boom. What would people like to hear in the car? That's what I always say. Even if because as a comic, there's no down days. I remember the day my dad died, I opened a show that night in Wellington. Like there's no sick days. There's no, the only time I've ever cancelled a show was because we lost a baby that morning. And then I didn't do a show that night, but I did a show the next night. But people, when you go and promote your stuff or whatever, you got to be up. If you're the best tasting cereal, but you're in a box that looks shit, no one's going to taste the fucking cereal ever.
But the thing that I would always think is I'm playing to maximum 300, 400 people tonight, but there's like 40,000 people listening to this right now. Like more people are going to hear me do this interview than are ever going to come and see the show. So this is actually the show. What I'm doing right now is the show. And you hope that like 1% of the people listening to it right now might actually come and see the real show. But this is also the show.
Even if they're not coming to the show tonight, they will look you up.
Right.
Or if they do see you somewhere in their feed, because that's how fucking algorithms work, all of a sudden they're going to see you everywhere. Now they've bought that secondhand car. They've seen you, so now they're going to keep seeing you. And then eventually they're going to follow you. And it's like playing the long game.
And stop. But stay tuned for part 2 of Urzila's chat with Wil Anderson. There's a heck of a lot more laughs to be had when Urz shares her recent encounter with the police and why Wil just can't use car horns correctly, and it absolutely shits him.
I don't care, that's enough already. Shut up.
Oh, shush.
This is my theory on any television show or anything. I never prep. I don't want to know anything that goes on in any of the shows. I don't, even if I get to do a new show, like say I get to do a show in another, say for instance QI, and I go, I've never seen QI, and they go, we'll send you a link, and I go, thanks, but I won't watch it because I think the comedy brain wants to act under pressure. You want to come up with something on the fly. I think, what is the difference? Me knowing what's going to happen and reacting slower on the night.
You treat every opportunity like you're on the TV show, Thank God You're Here. You're just like, I don't know what this is. I'm here. I'll adapt as we go on and see what happens.
The first time I ever did stand-up or ever went to a stand-up comedy show was the first time I ever did stand-up. I'd never watched stand-up. I'd never been to a show. I had no idea. So when friends said, you're funny, you should go do stand-up, they booked it in, and I just, they said, it's 5 minutes, I have to write 5 minutes. So I wrote some jokes that I thought was funny, just story things, and then I read it out, and it was 4 minutes, and I thought, that's long enough, I'd give them a minute to laugh.
Yep.
So arrogant.
I assume at least 20% of this will be laughter. So
yeah, of course. Not knowing that under intense pressure and adrenaline, I'm going to read that 4 minutes in 30 seconds. Anyway.
And over the top of any laughs that are happening. So you don't actually have to count it as extra time. It's concurrent time.
Yeah. Well, I didn't know any of that, did I? So the first year was tough, but I learned so much in that, and it was just, it was just crazy. So I think that sort of has worked for me, not the unknown, because I think my brain wants to fill that space and wants to fill that space with funny shit. Like Easter Monday, I got pulled over by the cops. I had just left Narrawarren and I was going 101 kilometres an hour. But I had bought the kids these dinosaur masks that you put over your face and then it's just got elastic, and as you talk, it looks like the dinosaur mask is talking.
Sure.
It's just plastic and elastic. It's probably the thing that's going to sink the earth. But
if that's the thing. Like, I mean,
I'm
of
okay
all the
with
things that are happening, if that's the thing, if that is the one that tips us right over the edge, then not on you, to be honest.
But anyway, so my 6-year-old played with it for a bit and then put it in the back, on the back bit there by the back window in the car, right? But in the back of the car was the 6-year-old, his sister, and then my mother-in-law in the middle of the two baby seats or booster seats, and then in the front, myself and my bestie. So we're driving. And then I get pulled over by the cops. So this lady police officer walks up and I can check her in the mirror walking up, and I'm like, it's a tense situation when you get pulled over and you're like, and then she comes right up to the window and she has obviously seen the dinosaur mask in the back, and she just pops her head in, and the first thing she says to me is, what's up with the dinosaur in the back? And I just looked at her and I go, that is my mother-in-law. How dare you? Like, we laughed so hard. The setup was so perfect because it was tense. So that kind of sums up where if you're in a pressure situation, you're going to come up with funny shit.
Right.
But also, if you look like George Garland, Robin Williams, Jim Gaffigan, even Joan Rivers, if you look at their material, if you just had to read that in an essay, you go, okay, this is a fucking maniac that wrote some shit down. But it's in the delivery, right? Like, it all comes down to the delivery and the chemistry between you and the audience.
Yeah, you're right. It's meant to be about that idea that, hopefully you connect with why I'm angry about this or why it's my perspective. But do you ever have something that, despite how many times you've done it now, where you're like, this is definitely like hilarious and I find this hilarious, that doesn't translate? Do you ever have that moment still where it surprises you?
Yes, 100%. I just did a thing about drag queens grooming children. And I'm like, drag queens don't groom, they stylize. Grooming is a straight people sport. Like, gays don't groom. Hey, but do you ever get one of those things, those jokes where you go, I know this is funny, I don't know how to tell you yet.
Yes.
And it's just sort of in the delivery or even if you just scooch the start to the middle and the middle, sometimes it's just simple like that, or you need to change a number. Like, I didn't realize when I started doing comedy how some numbers are just funnier than others. Like 7 is funnier than 4. You don't know why, but people will laugh when you go, you've got 7 children in the back. Well, if you go 4 children in the back, they go, yes. And
yeah, it's not quite comical enough, is it? But that's one of my favorite things, is also just like sometimes just finding that word or that one phrase to describe something that just unlocks it. Like there, where you're just like, there it is.
Yeah.
Like sometimes that moment where you, like you said, you know something's funny, or you know an idea is worth talking about, or you know that there's something unique in the way that you're getting people to look at something, but you haven't you're 70% of the way there or 80% of the way there. And just that night when you unlock it and you're like, oh, yeah, no, that's exactly how it should have gone the entire time. Got this like story about the first time I went out to like after the pandemic. So it's quite this like going to see Kendrick Lamar, and I tell this whole like story of this is the first time that I go out and, you know, I'm the only person wearing a mask. And the twist is that I'm wearing a mask because I'm older than everybody at the show. Like it leads to a whole other thing, but like that's basically was the original premise. But there was this one line where I said that I lied to this like other woman who was like the next oldest person and told her that I had, you know, I'd brought my kids to the show. And now it's become like honestly 3 minutes about how well I treat my imaginary children. Like that's the bit now, which it was like the throwaway. And then you're just like, no, this is the bit that everyone is enjoying the most. I'm enjoying the most, like these imaginary children and how well I treat them and the things I take them to and all this. And then like the whole point of the bit, it's almost like a letdown when I actually get to what the point of the bit is after this like thing that just, I was like, I don't know where it came from, but it's like my favorite bit in the show.
But that's the little joys that the shows give. It's like I'd never want to look at the sound guy and see boredom in his eyes, or like he just hopes he can go on his phone but he can't because everyone can see him kind of situation. I never want to see that. I want to come up with new shit, just little bits every night where afterwards they go, that bit that you did there. And I'm like, yes, he was paying attention. Like that's the little treats. That's our little payoffs. Yeah, I mean, we get the laughter and all of that, but that's the little treats.
It's funny that you say that because I literally had the other night. So the theatre I play, I've played that same theatre for 13 or 14 years. And so the feedback I respect the most of any feedback I get during the festival is what the people who've worked there for all those years think of the show.
100%.
Because I'm like, you didn't, like, you're paid to be here.
Yeah.
You're here against your will, technically. Like, I mean,
100%.
you know, 2 months ago you were seeing 90 people on stage doing Come From Away. Like, tonight you're just seeing me yell about Roald Dahl. And like, so your feedback I value.
100. Yeah, I'm the same. I'm like, or if the ushers say something, if the ushers talk to me after the show, I'm like, hi. I'm like, can I have a photo with you? Oh my God. Hey, can I ask you, are your friends made up mainly of comedians or normies?
Definitely, I have a lot of friends in comedy, lifelong friends in comedy, and that's why I love festivals, is like going to, like, you know, having those conversations with people that you can't have those conversations with anybody else.
No,
but I reckon
right.
about half and half. What is it for you?
Yeah, I think it's about half and half, or maybe, it's about half and half, I reckon, because it's like you say, there's no one that can understand a comedian quite like another comedian, because we just have a darker sense of humour, and I almost feel like I have to apologise to my friends when I come back from tour, because then I'm sort of still a bit wild at 2-3 days after, and I'll say
you know
something.
that thing when you've been talking to comedians only, and then you take that level of conversation into a scenario that isn't quite that level.
And also, like, just if you suddenly find yourself back in the dating game, you can't. It's impossible. Like,
oh my gosh.
It's so hard, because people just go, why would you say that? And I'm like, that's tour speak. Yeah, but the fact that it would live in your head, I'm like, oh no, there's much darker that lives in there. I'm only letting out the
That's what
grayscale
offended you.
stuff. Yeah.
That's your line?
You don't even know
God.
the overprint black stuff that's in there. This is hardcore. Oh my God.
Oh man.
Hey, have I ever told you that Russell, that's on the Gruen with you? So for those playing
Russell Howcroft.
Yeah, that's playing the home game. Will, of course, is hosts the Gruen transfer. And so Russell used to be my boss, like long before comedy, long before I started doing comedy.
In advertising.
Yeah. He was the CEO of Y&R. And he would fly over occasionally to New Zealand and we'd all have to tidy up our desks and make sure the timesheets are done because Russell's coming, and then we'd all go sit in the lunchroom bar area, everyone with a Heineken, drink slowly, you're not fucking getting pissed while Russell's here. And we'll all just be sipping our Heinekens and he'd come in and do like a little motivational speech, basically the equivalent of him climbing Everest. And then we're all like, as soon as he leaves, like, oh, thank fuck he's gone. And then we get on the piss. But yeah, he would come once a month, I reckon.
That's so funny. I mean, the advertising industry does seem like one of those ones, though, from the conversations I hear backstage where, like, for people that are outside the industry, they probably don't know this, but if like an advertising agency has a big client, like so there might be one or two big clients that really are employing half of the people
100%.
Who work there in some form. So if you lose that client, they just seem to be like one day an agency will be 30 people, the next day it's 120 people, and then 3 months later it's like 8 people. And you're like, what happened? What just went on?
This is what I don't like. When we lose a client, so I worked for Ogilvy in New Zealand too. We lose a client, a big client, right? Say Rebel Sport or the Briscoe Group. They go over and sign up with Y&R. So now Y&R won the pitch, but they don't have the staff because they were still on 8 people. Now they come and get all of us that used to work on the account. We're now still working on the account. So at Rebel Sports, like, well, we changed agencies. It's all going to be fresh and new. And I'm like, no, bitch, it's still
Just me.
exactly all of us. You basically have a different HR department. The only people that have changed is reception and HR.
You are now at Y&HR. This is our new company.
So I always loved it. And then the first time the client comes for a visit and they sort of look out at all of us and we're all like, yes, Stacey, it's still us, bitch. And then you can see this shock.
So the last job that I had, so I was working at the Herald and Weekly Times here in Melbourne, and basically what I was doing, because I had a journalism degree and I'd quit journalism. I'd been working in the Canberra Press Gallery to come to Melbourne and do stand-up comedy. Yeah. But of course, as you know, like doesn't pay that well in the first couple of years. So I'd burnt through all the money that I had saved and I needed to get another job again. So I got this job writing selling advertising and writing advertorial copy for the Herald and Weekly Times. So the Weekly Times is their like farm magazine, their country magazine, their sort of rural newspaper, I guess that they would. Yeah. So occasionally like some big tractor company or like, landscaping company or whatever would buy a double page and they'd need to have a bit of advertorial copy that ran next to, that felt like journalism, but definitely was advertising. And so that was basically my role. I was no good at selling stuff. I would have been terrible, pursuing that as a long-term career. But I had one of those bosses that I don't know what was going through his mind because I was contributing nothing. It was clear. It was demonstrable how little I was doing in the office. I would often pretend I was going out to find a client or do an interview and just go to the movies. I wouldn't even leave the city. I wouldn't even get in my car. I wouldn't get my car out of the car park. I would just wander down the street and I would go and see a movie and then I would go back to the office. And I still
smelling of popcorn.
Still to this day cannot believe that I quit that job. Yeah. I was just like, what do I need to do to get fired from this job? One day I just had to go in and say, I'm leaving. I quit. You are going to notice productivity goes up just from having me not here. Yeah. You won't need to replace me. I'm doing nothing. You're coping fine without me.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah, I think we all have jobs like that. But that really set me up. And then comedy just kind of, over. Everyone has sort of those baked bean months, where you go, we're going to have a lot of toast and baked beans this month. But
you never know. Might go back to baked bean months at some stage.
We are all one bad tweet away.
Exactly.
From fucking going back to the baked bean days.
And as Jimmy Carr often says, the thing you're going to get cancelled for, you probably already said. So
100%. You tweeted that in 2008.
Yeah, it's not in your future. It's in your past. Someone hasn't found it yet. That's all it is.
Yeah. but there has been stuff. There has been stuff that I've gotten in trouble
But
for.
of course, but also because the times have changed. There are things that I said in the past that I would not say today. Mate, I'm a stand-up comedian. I'm not like a futurist. There might be something in my show right now that is really offensive in 10 years from now.
Yeah.
Like I think that sometimes with eating meat, it seems to be the one that, so I don't eat meat, but eating meat feels like one of those things that say 50 years from now or 70 years or 100 years from now, people might look back on and go, you ate meat or you were proud of eating meat.
Yeah.
But you don't know what it is. It might not be eating meat. It might be like if you don't know at the time, it's very hard to then get in a time machine and go, you should have known 10 years ago what the correct term was to use in this situation.
Hey, Will, let me ask you something.
Yes.
What is
Okay.
the thing about other people that shit you to absolute death?
Interesting. Okay, so I think for me, it's got to be people who think that everything was better in the olden days. Like it's my one hate in life. Anyone whose entire shtick is being a reactionary. Like I feel like the easiest job in media is being and there is part of me sometimes that is so tempted to just make that turn, to do the Joe Rogan switch, the Russell Brand rebranding, the Steve Price of Australia, where you just be the grumpy curmudgeon who sits on the end of a panel because it's the easiest job in the entire world.
Yeah.
You don't have to prepare. All you have to do is listen to what everybody else says and then just grumble that that's not good or things were better in the older days. And so that's my pet hate, I think.
Yeah, I have to, as an immigrant, I have very close friends who will only shop at South African shops and buy South African spices, South African tomatoes or South African mayonnaise. I'm like, why the fuck did you move? Just go back there. Now you're paying 4 times for fucking egg and olive oil in a jar. Just go back. Stop with this shit. I buy the occasional, if I see, these spices are good from South Africa. Yeah. But, most of those are stocked in my local shop.
But South African mayonnaise is the best because, they're experts in being able to separate the whites. So
good. So good. See? That's the dinosaur in the back. It just got you. Why would you write a show? Just fucking get on stage, honestly. Never. It almost always splits with us. You can always see the big divide between the oil and the ink.
Oh, man.
What's the thing about you that shits you to death?
I am this. So I'm a reluctant horn user. So we were talking about driving earlier, and I think that I'd love to be able to assert myself more in traffic situations, but I doubt my own. I feel like the horn is too open to interpretation. We're not clear enough about, we've got a one horn fits all policy that I do not think, there's too fine a line to me between, sometimes somebody's in a left-hand turn lane, there's a little arrow. They haven't seen the arrow for whatever reason. They're in front of you. And all you want to communicate to that person is a little hey, the arrow's changed. Hey, I'm cool. Being a good, you might not have noticed. Hey. And every time I try to use the horn, it always comes as off as fuck you. And
move, cunt.
Why? We spend so much time teaching people how to drive, and yet we spend none of that time on running us through how hard or soft to hit the horn in that situation. And again, it's like a bye-bye thing. The bye-bye horn, the little bye-bye, cannot master that. Every single person I've ever tried to say goodbye to in a car thinks that I've just driven off going, fuck you, or silent. Because I go too far one way or the other. The amount of times I've driven away from family trying to give them a bye-bye wave and then just gone the other way and just tapped my horn, no noises come out, and I've just gone, that'll do. I'm out of here. That'll do.
What do you drive?
How's this? So I used to have a vintage car. I had a 1967 Ford Mustang. It was a beautiful car. It got stolen. And I rang the police. True story. I rang the police and I said, hey, my car got stolen. What should I do? And this is literally what the Australian policeman said to me. He said, mate, you're going to have to buy a new car. And I was like, is there not something between those two steps that the police get involved in? I was always under the impression that you might look for it or something. Do you want a description, some clues, anything, where it was? But so I didn't have a car for about 10 years. I drive an Audi, like an Audi sort of, like it's one of those, not a four-wheel drive, but a thing that looks like an SUV, I guess they call it, right? Yeah. But apparently I was in the city the other day, and so I'm in the left-hand lane, but there's a right-hand lane as well of traffic both going in the same direction. So we're stopped at the lights. So if you can imagine, I'm the first car where the lights are. There is like a car next to me on the right-hand side that's also going to go through that lights. One back behind them is a taxi cab. So this taxi cab, in my rearview mirror, I can see this taxi cab trying to get my attention, and I'm thinking, oh, maybe my tire's flat or something, So I wind down my window, and he has wound down the passenger side window so that he can shout at me through the window to my car. And he shouts this at me. He goes, people who drive your car are the worst drivers on the road. Like this. So just a random piece of feedback from this. I hadn't done anything to cut him off. It was slightly undermined by the fact that I was eating a chocolate paddle pop at the same time. When it did undermine I wanted to but I had my paddle pop, so I couldn't really get angry.
So you can't get too aggressive when you have a paddle pop.
But it undermines any authority you might have in that situation, is the fact that you have to put down your paddle pop to make a point. But I hadn't cut him off. I hadn't done anything. The fact that he literally had just identified my car. Apparently other people who drive the same car are not good drivers. Yeah. But the greatest irony of this story is that he had distracted me so much. The lights changed and I missed the lights, and then he just looks at me like, I told you. And I was like, not I told you. That's entrapment. This is on you. You made me do this. I was ready to go. And now I've got someone beeping fuck you behind me. Maybe it's polite, but I can't tell.
That can't set you up.
Maybe I am, well, of course I am a dickhead. Like, I'm a professional dickhead. Like, so you might be right. But the idea that you could have 100% strike rate with any demographic of people, I think if only dickheads bought Audis or all dickheads bought Audis, then you, as someone who's worked in advertising, they would be super aware of that. You'd be in a meeting, they'd be like, we've done some research, we've identified we've got 100% strike rate with dickheads. All our advertising is now going to go entirely to dickheads. Why are we wasting time advertising to people who aren't dickheads when it's only dickheads who buy our car?
Yeah, let's just start a magazine. Dickheads are us, and just advertise to them.
Full of other dickhead stuff and put a few Audi ads in. Yeah. Perfect. Job done.
Singlets in there. Crocs.
What else do dickheads like? Yeah, we can fill this full of it.
Margarine. Oh my God. Hi, Will. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
My pleasure.
I've had such a good time. I'm glad we asked you for a conversation starter. Otherwise, we
didn't get to those, unfortunately.
Unfortunately.
We'll save those.
Next time. Maybe on your podcast.
Yeah.
And that's a wrap for this week's double episode with Wil Anderson. If you liked this episode, you'll love our back catalogue. I really don't know if I can pick just one as my favourite episode, but if I did have to choose, I'd probably say Luke McGregor. I mean, there was a lot of chat about adult nappies, but you will have to listen to find out the context for that. Or the episode with Sarah Millican is iconic. Urzila shares a story about her, a plane, and a pair of underwear. Just head to wherever you get your podcasts and search That's Enough Already. But we'll catch you next Monday for a fresh new episode. See ya.
Thanks for listening to this episode of That's Enough Already, hosted by me, Urzila Carlson, and produced by Natalie Turner. Supervising producer was Nick McClure, and special thanks to Ella Leaf and Beck Sutherland. Couldn't do it without you, gals. If you like this podcast, remember to subscribe, share it with all of your friends, tell your mum, tell your sister. Don't tell that annoying brother of yours, but definitely share it with a friend.